Have you ever seen a painting that bordered on the abstract but wasn't quite there? Have you ever read a passage in a book that was so descriptive it instantly conjured an image in your head? I bet you didn't know that these two art forms share a genre. That genre is Impressionism. Even if you don't recognize it, you are surrounded by Impressionism, and I, for one, have studied Impressionism extensively in art and in literature, and tend to be very drawn to Impressionist music. Today, I am going to address for you the origins of Impressionism and discuss their relevance in art, literature, and music, primarily focusing on art. When most people think of Impressionism, they tend to think of the French painter Claude Monet, and not without reason, but the origins of Impressionism began far before that. Rembrandt van Rijn, a Dutch painter, is considered the godfather of Impressionism. For one painting, he painted The Night Watch in 1642, and it's this colossal painting that has some underlyings of what will later become the Impressionist movement. For instance, he uses light in very focused ways, and he paints kind of the idea of a scene rather than painting an actual scene. The name for the movement itself came from a painting in the middle of the Impressionist movement by Claude Monet called Impression Sunrise, which was painted in 1872. This term begins to be applied in the 1870s and 1880s to art that had begun in about the 1840s and is continually applied to them. The best known form of Impressionism is perhaps pictorial art, like the paintings of Claude Monet. Margaret Samu characterizes Impressionism as a revolution in painting because of the use of vibrant colors and the synthetic pigments that were used. Prior to Impressionism, most paintings had been done in dull earth tones, and most paintings had been glossed over in a gold coating that dulled out the colors further, rather than allowing the glossy sheen. And in the Impressionist movement, they did away with all of this and started using more vibrant colors, and this is where the color aquamarine came from. Also, the synthetic pigments were developed not from nature like they had been before, and that's how they got those really, really kind of vibrant colors. I guess there's no other word for them. Also, Impressionist paintings tend to feel unfinished, which was the objective. The objective of Impressionism is to allow the viewer or the reader or the listener to complete the painting or the description or the image, him or herself. Impressionist painters also used short, broken brushstrokes and didn't like to blend colors because they wanted to be able to have the viewer step back and see the painting as a whole rather than getting up too close to it and only being able to see it there. Also, Impressionist painters tended to focus on daily life rather than grandiose scenes. Just as Impressionism was revolutionary in pictorial art, Impressionism was also revolutionary in music and literature. For instance, Claude Debussy is perhaps the most famous Impressionist composer. Even if you're unfamiliar with the name, I can almost guarantee you've heard his song Clair de Lune. His foray into Impressionism began with his score for an opera, Le Printemps, which means the spring in French, and it went from there, and he is now the most famous Impressionist composer. Additionally, George Moore, an Irish writer, wrote in the Impressionist fashion, and his idea was to create the outline of a scene and allow the reader to finish it. In his novel, A Drama in Muslin, he writes, "The violet waters of the bay had darkened, and like separating banners of a homeward-moving procession, the colors of the sky went east and west. The girdle of rubies had melted, had become the pale red lining of a falling mantle, the large spaces of gold grew dim, orange and yellow streamers blended, lilac and blue pennants faded to deep grays. Dark hoods and dark veils were drawn closer, purple was gathered like garments about the loins, and the night fell. The sky, now decorated with a crescent moon and a few stars, was filled with stillness and adoration. The day's death was exquisite, even human." This passage depicts a sunset, which you could just say the sunset, but rather than doing that, George Moore wanted to express the idea and the outline of a scene and allow you to fill it in with these just beautiful, sometimes long-winded descriptions. Impressionism started to be applied retroactively to music and literature in the 1930s and 1940s, but it still applies to music and literature today. For instance, Taylor Swift's songs tend to be extremely impressionist in lyricism. They are very descriptive, but still allow for the listener to create his or her own image. It's very easy to insert yourself into one of her songs. Also, J.K. Rowling, author of the world-famous Harry Potter series, has had Impressionism have a clear influence on her. If you read her descriptions of the battles at Hogwarts or of the Hogwarts castle, of nature, of anything, you can clearly see the Impressionist undertones. If you can begin to recognize the tenets of Impressionism, you can also begin to recognize the influence Impressionism has on your daily life. It does seem like an old-fashioned or antiquated ideal, but it does still surround you in modernity. Maybe not in the same ways, but it does still surround you. Impressionism is worth recognizing, and I hope that you can begin to spot the tenets of Impressionism in your day-to-day life.